Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're making some fancy cheese crackers. This may seem frivolous, and it is, but I thought it would be fun to try to make. To start this dish we need 7.5 ounces of cheese, so I have 5.5 ounces of sharp cheddar and 2 ounces of Parmesan. Over some parchment paper, I'm going to grate this down over the smallest holes of my box grater. I want the cheddar cheese for that sharpness and creaminess, and I want Parmesan for nuttiness and saltiness. But use whatever cheeses speak to you. Once that's all grated up, you're going to be left with this lovely pillow of beautiful grated cheese. We're just going to gather that up, pop this in a bowl, and set this aside until we're ready to use it. I also wanted some fresh herbs, so I have 6 stems of thyme and 2 stems of rosemary. Just going to pull all the leaves off, and we do need to break this down as finely as possible since rosemary is so woody. So using a sharp knife, or if you're lucky enough to have a mezzaluna, you can give this a nice, fine choppity chop. Once that's all minced up, we can transfer this over to a small bowl and set this aside. Now in the bowl of our food processor, we need 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 3/4 teaspoon of kosher salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. We can put on the lid and give this a couple of pulses just to start incorporating those dry ingredients. We're also going to need 5 tablespoons of unsalted butter, and I'm adding this in 1 tablespoon at a time, just to let that incorporate thoroughly throughout our dry ingredients. Then for even more flavor, we're going to add in 1 tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. Once that's all come together, we can add in all of our grated cheese, and our chopped up herbs. This is already starting to smell really delicious. Pop that lid back on, and we need to start pulsing this together until all of those ingredients combine and incorporate. Now we need a little bit more moisture in this dough, so with the motor running on low, we're going to add in 6 tablespoons of ice cold water, 1 tablespoon at a time, just until our dough starts to resemble wet sand. I used 6 tablespoons. You may use less or more depending on the humidity of your kitchen, your altitude, etc. And you're going to know your dough is ready when you can press it together and it stays together in a clump in your hand. Now we can tip this out onto our workbench, and it's going to kind of resemble biscuit dough, where it looks like a hot mess and you don't know if this is going to come together. But the heat of your hands is going to warm up that butter and allow this dough to start becoming a cohesive, massive dough. I do recommend using a bench scraper as well. It is your best friend in this process because it gets all those loose bits and gets them to come together and join the party. So just start working your dough until it kind of resembles a very basic sandcastle. And using the heat of your hands, you're going to start melting that butter. And we're going to split this into 2 portions because it's just going to be easier to work with. Now once it has somewhat come together, we can wrap each portion in some plastic wrap. And to make your life easier when you go to roll this out, once we have it wrapped up like a little gift in our plastic wrap, we can start shaping it into almost a rectangle. And do this to both portions of your dough. And we're going to pop this in the freezer and let this rest for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, we can take out a portion at a time. And we're going to just start using our pin to roll this out. You can press down on it. I did remove that parchment paper. You'll notice in a second because it wasn't doing me any favors. We also want to laminate this dough. So once we get it into a cohesive rectangle, we're going to take our bench scraper and fold it over on itself like a book, and then give this a little spin, press, and keep doing this 2 or 3 times. This is going to create some layers throughout your cracker, and that butter is going to distribute even more. Then we want to roll this out to about 1/8 of an inch. I didn't, and I should have, because I think the crackers would have been much crispier. After you've rolled this out to about 1/8 of an inch, we're going to use a ruler. This is my food ruler. I only use this for food. I'm using a pizza cutter. You can use a ravioli cutter too. We're going to start cutting this into 1-inch strips one way and 1-inch strips the other way, so we end up with 1-inch squares. This is going to resemble those very famous crackers that come in that red box, but I'm not going to mention due to copyright reasons. And at this point, you should be preheating your oven to 350 degrees, because this is going to bake for a simple 15 minutes on the middle rack of your oven. So once we have all the squares cut up, we need to go in with a chopstick and poke a hole in the middle of our cracker. This is going to keep it from rising, and it's going to give you a flat, beautiful cracker. After you've punched all your holes in, we're going to put this on a baking sheet, pop this in the freezer for another 15 minutes. Just so that butter can re-solidify. You want it to kind of melt in the oven, the air will get in there, and it'll create these beautiful layers. So after 15 minutes, we're going to brush this with egg wash, sprinkle with kosher salt, and bake for 15 minutes. And after 15 minutes, they should be beautiful and golden and crispy on the bottom. We do need to let these cool for about 10 minutes before we transfer them over to a bowl. Now let's give these a taste. Again, I should roll these a little thinner next time. They're cheesy, you taste all those herbs, you actually taste the olive oil. Because we're not going to eat this all in one sitting, we want to let this dry out completely before we store it in an airtight container. But there it is, fancy cheese crackers. Am I going to make these again? Probably not, but they were fun to make. And I hope you guys try it out as well. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you loved it, subscribe and hit that notification bell, because I put out new videos every Thursday. Thank you again. Happy holidays and happy cooking. These were a lot more fiddly than I thought they would be.